The story of Adam and Eve is so fascinating because here we have Adam, that was the first man to be created by God, and Eve, his wife, who was tailor made for him by God. He had a wife that was perfect for him, yet they had such an imperfect marriage. And today we're going to be looking critically at their marriage relationships to find out how to build a marriage that withstands adversity. Thank you for joining us on today's show of Wise Attraction. My name is Dr. Bibi Babs. I am the host and founder of Wise Attraction, which is a resource hub for building strong relationships. So today we're beginning our series called Five Marriages of the Bible. I mean, if you want to build a strong marriage based on Christian principles, the best way to do it is to look at what happened in the Bible, because the Bible is our guide. So I'm going to get right into it. Without much ado, I want to start by giving a brief summary of the story of Adam and Eve. Now, when you look at the story of Adam and Eve in the Bible, there's so much to see. You can talk about, the fall of mankind. You can talk about the dominion that God gave Adam and humanity and things like that. So there's so much about them. But today, on today's show, I'm not focusing on these things. I want to focus specifically on the interaction, the marriage relationship between Adam and Eve. So just to give a brief summary before we get right into it, Adam was the first person to be created on earth. God gave him dominion over everything, the fish of the sea, literally everything on earth. But Adam was alone. And God said, it's not good for man to be alone. And so he made Adam to fall into a deep sleep, and he created Eve. He literally made Eve out of Adam. And he came and he presented Eve to Adam. And when Adam saw her, he said, this is the flesh of my flesh, the bone of my bones. He recognized her as someone similar to him. And there God gave an instruction saying that and a man shall leave his mother and his father and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And then you see that that's where their marriage relationship began. Literally, Adam was introduced to his wife by God. That's the best that it gets. Sometimes people get confused about, how do I know this is my partner? How do I know this is my husband? How do I know this is my wife? With Adam, there was no confusion whatsoever, because God literally brought the woman to him and said, this is her. And they began their relationship. The next thing we see in the Bible is that we see the serpent speaking to Eve and telling her to eat the fruit in the Garden of Eden. Now, one of the instructions that God had given them was not to eat from the tree. Eat any fruit from the tree of knowledge and of good and evil. That was literally the one instruction, the one thing that they were not to do in the Garden of Eden. And the serpent managed to convince Eve to go ahead and eat these particular fruits from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. She ate it. She gave it to her husband. He also ate it. And that's how, of course, they rebelled against God by doing that. And that was when they fell, and God came and pronounced a curse on the ground. He said that Eve will only have children through labor, and her desire will be to her husband Adam. For Adam, he was going to always labor to get food from the ground, and for the serpent, which is the snake, will crawl on its tummy, unlike other animals. So essentially, this is the summary of their relationship together. Of course, like the Bible then goes on to talk about how they had their children and the issues that their children had as well. But we're not going to go into that. We're just going to focus specifically on Genesis chapter 2 and chapter 3, where it talks about the relationship between Adam and Eve. So that was just a brief summary, because I know that most people know this story of Adam and Eve. So I don't want to dwell on this. I just want to go to the lessons from their relationship. So first of all, every marriage, one of the things I've learned from their relationship is that every marriage has its own challenges, and there's nothing like a perfect marriage. Sometimes people feel like, okay, if you marry the person that God designed for you. If you marry the right person, then you will not have issues. Well, from the story of Adam and Eve, we can see that that's a lie, because Adam, literally, his wife was created from his own rib, and given to him, yet they had their own issues that they face. So one of the lessons from their relationship is that every marriage will have its own temptations, its own seasons and times. When you go through a tough season, even if the tough season is caused by your spouse, it's not enough for you to then say that, oh, I married the wrong person simply because of something they're doing or not doing. So the fact that God ordered your steps and gave you a spouse, maybe you saw a vision, maybe he spoke to you directly, or maybe you chose and you believe that you believed at that point when you made the choice that this is the person for me. The fact that you're going through a difficult season, or that person is acting in a certain way or acting up, does not mean that that person is wrong for you. So I just wanted to establish that, because the story of Adam and Eve does tell us that very clearly. Secondly, another thing about from their marriage is that the principle of priority. At the beginning, if we look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 23, God had said to, Adam has said, this is the flesh of my flesh, the bone of my bones. After he made that declaration, verse 24, God said, and a man shall leave his father and his mother and cleave to his wife. Now, I believe that this is the principle of priority. One of the things I've learned is that marriage works best when it's treated as priority, when it's treated as the most important thing. Now, at this point in time, you know that God did not say Adam's marriage to Eve was not to affect Adam's relationship with God. So Adam's relationship with God was to remain where it was, which was the first thing, because before Eve came, Adam was relating with God. He had a relationship with God. But what God is saying is that, for me, my understanding of this verse 24 is that there will now be a reordering where, okay, my relationship with you stands, but your relationship with your family, which is your parents, your father, your mother, your siblings, and all of that, is not, you won't put it at the back burner, but it comes second. It comes in second place to your marriage. Now, I believe that if we take just this principle and apply it to our marriages, it will reduce a lot of issues. It's very obvious that the thing with in-laws, when anybody is getting married, there's this whole challenge with the in-laws. Sometimes I've heard of stories where the woman or the man is saying that he or she's too close to her family. He's too close to her family. I feel like I don't have a place in his life or her life because of the relationship that my husband or my wife has with my family. There's no room for me. Now, I believe that for us to do marriage and do it right, we need to understand that place of priority, that order of priority, which is the relationship with God first. And then secondly, your relationship with your spouse comes second. It's the second most important relationship in your life. This is the instruction we're saying from Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. Okay, so I'm just gonna move to the next point, which is something that I noticed about Adam and Eve's relationship is that there was a communication gap between two of them. So if you look at Genesis chapter 3 now, so Genesis chapter 2 ends with God giving this instruction to them about marriage, and the Bible says that they were naked and they were not ashamed. That was the end of Genesis chapter 2. In chapter 3, it begins with, more or less begins with Eve having a conversation with the serpent. And the serpent is saying, did God really say you should not eat of this fruit? So if you look at from chapter 3, from verse 1 to 5, a whole 5 verses, Eve was having a conversation with the serpent. Remember now, we've not seen any communication between Eve and Adam. All we're seeing is Eve talking to the serpent. And of course, the serpent convinces her. She takes the fruit, she eats it, and she goes to give her husband. And even when she goes to give her husband this fruit, what's so fascinating is that still they have no conversation. It's so shocking because Adam could have asked, why are you eating these fruits? Didn't God say we should not eat the fruit? There's literally nothing, no communication between both of them. So for 5 verses, you have the serpent speaking to Eve, and then between only 2 verses, Eve has eaten, Adam has eaten, they've already fallen, mankind has fallen in 2 verses, and then you now have from verse 8 to from verse 9 to verse 19 of Genesis chapter 3, where God is then speaking to them and of course giving them the consequences of their action. What I observe here is that the couple themselves, they were not communicating. And communication is one of the foundations for marriage. If Eve, when the serpent was speaking to her, because what the serpent was asking her to do was something that is against the principles of their marriage. The serpent wasn't asking her to do, oh, will you come, or something like, oh, will you come out to play tomorrow? That's not the kind of conversation they're having. Those kind of things you might not need to tell the person you're doing life with about that. But what the serpent was saying to her was, everything what they've told you to do something against it. Do something against the culture of your relationship. Do something against your marriage. Do something against God. And she didn't say anything to her husband. Instead, she carried on this conversation up to the end. And then when she was convinced, the Bible says that she gave the fruit to her husband who was with her. Now, there are different arguments about, was he there, was he not there? I'm not going to go into that today. But what I'm concerned about is that Eve never spoke to her husband about the conversation she was having with the serpent, number one. Number two, when Eve presented Adam with the fruits, Adam made no statements. Adam did not comment to say, oh, why did you eat this fruit? We're not meant to eat it. Adam wasn't shocked to say, oh, how come? Like, the Bible doesn't tell us that. And I believe that if there was any significant conversation between two of them, the Bible would have recorded it to say, okay, this is the conversation they had. I believe that this communication gap between two of them was ultimately what led to the fall. Now, I personally, that's what really surprises me, because I believe communication is so important to within a marriage. Why were they not speaking to themselves? These are two people that God ordained, that God brought together. Because sometimes we feel like, okay, if God brings us together, I've mentioned this point before, then we're going to have a perfect relationship. But that's not the case. Even with relationships with two people that God brings together, even when God gives you a thing, you have to work on that thing. You have to develop that thing. And that brings me up to the second principle, which is the principle of oneness, which the Bible talks about in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. You see, this thing about oneness, and the two shall become one flesh. I know it's about intimacy. And sometimes when we think about that, we only think about sexual intimacy. But this oneness is beyond sexual intimacy. Communication also builds on that intimacy. Communicating with each other as partners and as spouses in your relationship will build a deep intimacy between both of you. And that's something that Adam and Eve did not have. That's something that they could have done better, that they didn't do, and ultimately led to their fall. So I want to ask you, and I want you to think about your relationship. Are you communicating in your relationship? When you have negative thoughts, negative impressions about your spouse or about a situation that you're in, are you letting those negative thoughts sit with you and stay there with you, or are you dealing with them? I mean, I won't say that it's everything we should tell our spouse, because there's some things that they cannot necessarily handle. There's some thoughts, negative thoughts that you might have about your relationship that you need to deal with it with God, because it's only God that can actually help you in that situation to overcome that negative thinking. So Lessons to be learned from their relationship is, firstly, don't allow negative thoughts or feelings about your marriage and relationship linger. Deal with them immediately. Deal with them with God. If it's something that you need to deal with your spouse, have that conversation and deal with it. Talk to your spouse regularly. Have things like, how was your day? What's going on? How can I pray for you? What are the things you're worried about? What are the things you're happy about? What are the things that you feel like we need to pray together about? How do you want me to change to make things better in this relationship? It's not only when people have problems that they have these types of conversations. This type of conversations help you to connect, because sometimes when you're in a marriage relationship, life happens, and it just when life happens, you have kids, you have things you're doing, your job, your children, the extracurricular activities. Before you get around or get on with all those things, you might find that you're spent and you don't have time to actually give to your spouse. But it's really important to be intentional about creating time to spend with your partner. Another lesson is, be transparent. Open up your heart and your mind to your spouse. I mean, I know that I just said, it's interesting how I just said that. You might have, there's some negative thoughts that you have that you might not necessarily share with your spouse. The reason why I said that, not that you be keeping a secret from your spouse, is because there's some things that they cannot handle. If you know you're having such negative thoughts that they can't handle because to affect them negatively, then deal with it with God. Go to God and give him your heart. But ideally, what you want in your relationship is that transparency and that openness, where you're sharing what is on your heart with your spouse. Another thing is that sometimes I want to ask you, in your relationship, is there an atmosphere? Have you both created an atmosphere where you can share openly? Have you created an atmosphere where you can be honest and candid with each other, even when you're saying what is not palatable to your spouse? And if you don't, I'd like to encourage you to create that type of atmosphere. You can say things that are hard. Create an atmosphere where you can say things that are hard to each other, because if those things are not said, they can lead to worse issues. Look at Eve. She could have had a conversation with her husband early enough. She could have told him, oh, this is what the serpent is suggesting. Even the serpent told her, because she said, when the serpent asked her, the God say you should not I've forgotten what the serpent said. I can't remember his exact words. And she said, God said we should not touch the fruit. That's not what God said. If she had gone and had a conversation with Adam, immediately the serpent started suggesting something negative to her. Adam could have given her the correct instruction. Perhaps, I don't know. Perhaps they wouldn't have had the fall that they had. Maybe there's a conversation that you need to have with your partner that is going to save you, save your relationship, save your marriage from calamity, save your marriage from falling, or save you guys from whatever temptation. I believe that every marriage, from what I'm learning from Adam and Eve, I'm seeing that every single marriage will have its challenges, will have its difficult times. The grass is not greener on the other side. But it's either you're seeing what people are putting out there on social media, or you're seeing people that are actually working together to overcome adversity in their relationship. So one of the things that will really help you and us and myself, of course, as I'm reading all of this, I'm really learning, is communicating, being transparent, and building intimacy. There are different types of intimacy. There's sexual intimacy, which is also important within a marriage, and there's emotional intimacy. And that emotional intimacy is built through communication and transparency, having a situation where you can easily share and open up your heart totally about what's going on there. Now, I just want to say something as we come to the end of today's show. I believe that when your marriage is not being treated as priority, it can be a hindrance for emotional intimacy. emotional and communication intimacy, where you're so close to somebody that you can easily tell them anything. Because if you're not prioritizing your marriage relationship, it means that you're prioritizing other things over your spouse, and that spouse could be so hurt and things like that, that they might begin to hide things from you because they believe that they're not important, they're not priority. So they cannot share certain things with you because they don't know how you take it. So if there's anything you take from this show is, I want you to begin to assess your own relationship. Find out from yourself first. Are you free to share anything? Can you share anything with your spouse? Are you withholding things from your spouse? What are you withholding? Why are you withholding those things? Begin to explore those areas, and also ask your spouse as well. Spend time communicating with your spouse, finding out, okay, are there things that you're afraid of telling me about? Why are you not telling me about those things? Are you being completely transparent to me? Do you find it easy to tell me about certain things? If not, why not? And it's also important to come to a place where, to be at a place where you're someone that they can tell some hard truths. Train yourself that way. Sometimes it's difficult. It's difficult to hear the truth because it's so painful and it's so heavy, when they're giving you some negative feedback. But if you're watching this, you have to develop a taste bud for the truth, taste bud for some negative feedback. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Me that's telling you this. Nobody is perfect. Look at, if Adam and Eve, the first human beings that were on this earth, sin had not entered the world, sin entered through them because they ended up being imperfect. Is it now you that's coming into this world now with everything going on, with the media, where you can learn so much things that are not right and things that are right as well? Is it you that will now be perfect? So we're all imperfect. So develop yourself to a point where you can take it where people are telling you this thing you did is wrong, because that will help your marriage relationship, and that would give your spouse the comforts that they need to be able to tell you things that they're not particularly happy about. And also, when your spouse tells you, that you would also have the freedom to talk to them, so that your marriage can be strong enough to withstand adversity. I believe that if Adam and Eve had spent some time talking, they would perhaps they would have overcome the temptation. That's it for today's show. If you haven't subscribed to Wise Attraction Chat Show, please subscribe on YouTube, and we'll be continuing the series on 5 marriages of the Bible. Stay tuned. Next Thursday at 7 p.m. we'll be looking at another marriage relationship. I'll share about the relationship we'll be looking at during the week. Thanks so much for watching. If you know anyone that's going to benefit from this video, please do not hesitate to share it with them. And if you enjoyed watching, please give it a thumbs up. I'm just going to read some comments before I leave. Mrs. Lafunki saying, fantastic point. Thank you for joining the show. Nengi says, true. Thank you for joining the show. And Miss Lafunki saying, great show, Dr. Bibi. Thanks a lot for joining. Thanks for joining, for communicating, for participating. I will see you next week, Thursday. Bye.